What are you eating right now? No, really. Are you eating something? How are you getting it into your body? Through your feet? Through your hair? Well, obviously we hope that you're getting it into your body through your mouth. But how does a plant get all of the nutrients in that it needs? The transport of nutrients around the plant is one of the most critical functions it does. It must do this in order to perform photosynthesis and produce sugars. We'll look at how this process occurs in a couple of different types of plants. In general, we look at water being pulled up from the roots of the plant through the xylem, and the carbon dioxide and oxygen being exchanged through the leaves of the plant. We've also talked in photosynthesis about the light wavelengths that enter the leaves and are absorbed by the photosynthetic pigments. Now, you see at the bottom of our diagram that oxygen and carbon dioxide can also move in through the roots. We'll look at this process and how it's tied to the uptake of minerals. Now, in this basic process, we're going to produce sugars in the leaves that are transported throughout the plant. This sugar does not directly give the plant energy. The plant still must go through cellular respiration using its mitochondria just like you do. This is a very common misconception. Plants still must do cellular respiration, meaning plants use oxygen. We'll talk about this more. Take something like a giant sequoia. How is it that you will ever get enough nutrients to the top of that plant to support photosynthesis? It's the same way the shortest plants on the planet get their water, up the trees, up the plants, up the flowers, to the tops, to supply what is needed for photosynthesis. See the people down at the bottom? That's a big tree. We've talked about root hairs before. I wanted to come back and think about them just for one more moment and give you a better picture of them. We've talked before about root hairs increasing the surface area of a root and making an extremely absorptive environment. This is terrific for the uptake of nutrients as well. Now, if we're going to take in nutrients through a plant root, it has to be regulated. You don't want the plant accidentally taking up toxic waste into its roots and poisoning the plant. So we do have mechanisms for water transpiration and transportation that make it critical for this process to occur in a very efficient way, but still in a regulated way as well. So what we see here are two particular routes that allow water and nutrients to enter the plant. This is a cross-section of a root, so we see the root hair off to the side here. Okay, and if you can distinguish the colors, we have this pink line that comes in and follows along and is going to move actually between the cells themselves. Okay, so it kind of takes this outside route and eventually gets into something here labeled as the endodermis. We've talked about dermal tissue in plants. You know what dermal tissue is in you, I hope, if you don't remember what it is in plants. In you, it's your skin. In plants, it's the same thing. So why an endodermis? Endo, remember, is inside. So when we look at endodermis inside the plant, what we're actually looking at is it surrounding the vascular bundles in the middle of this root. So the xylem and the phloem are this big bundle in the middle, and we'll look at a zoomed out picture in just a second. But this intracellular route, this blue line, is actually moving in through the root hair. You notice this root hair is a single cell. Moving in through the root hair and then through these gaps in the plant cells, through the ground tissue, and then again through the endodermis and into the xylem to move it up the plant. What we see is these gaps are labeled here as plasmodesmata, we talked about this as a specialized plant structure. These are the holes in the cell walls of plants that allow the plant cells to communicate to one another. These are not the stoma that we see in the leaves. This is different. What we're looking for here is communication between every cell in the plant. So this intracellular route allows movement of nutrients and fluids from cell to cell to cell to cell. But remember, each one of these gaps is actually closed off with a plasma membrane. So every time you want to move from cell to cell, you have to move through a plasma membrane. This is good from the sense that it would regulate nutrient uptake very quickly. If the cell did not need a particular nutrient, it would not pass into this very first cell. It also helps to protect from waste products that might be entering the plant. This extracellular route seems to have no protection. It's just kind of running along between cells, sort of going unnoticed. But it will be regulated once it comes into this endoderm layer. But I like to think about this like I think about traffic. You can take the city route or the business route, this blue line, and stop at every stop light along the way. Or you can take the highway or the bypass and come in and very quickly move around the cells and get into here. Yes, you're still regulated by the stoplight at the end of the ramp, but you got there much faster. So even though this route may be longer, it can be much more efficient to bulk flow water into the plant, move it in much more quickly than under normal conditions. So if we zoom out, we see that X in the middle. We've talked about this before. This X is xylem of the vascular tissue, making that X in the middle so it's easy for you to remember. Surrounded by the darker purple, which is the phloem. The goal is to get water to move in through the root hairs through the intracellular route or the extracellular route and actually move into that xylem and move up the plant. So when we look at this process, what we need to think about is things are likely moving through both routes. We've labeled here the Casparian strip for you. This is where we're actually going to make sure that anything that's entering the xylem is what we want to have enter the xylem. So this is part of the endoderm layer on the inside, helping to regulate primarily nutrients, much less water or anything along those lines, or anything dissolved in the water, but we're going to regulate other nutrients that might be trying to kind of hitch a ride in with the water into our plant.